This story originally appeared on The Athletic, the best place to read about football online. Visit www.theathletic.co.uk/Tifo Football for a 30-day free trial and 50% off an annual subscription. Bournemouth have an extensive knowledge of financial peril, having twice been almost condemned to oblivion. Once in 1997 when supporters fundraised £35,000 at the Winter Gardens Concert Hall to stave off liquidation. And then again in 2008 when Chairman Jeff Mostyn's blind generosity kept the club afloat. 10 years ago, Mostyn was told during a private meeting with Administrator Gerald Krasner that the club would be liquidated live during a press conference unless the chairman, who would be stood at the back of the room during the briefing, indicated during it that he would save the club. He duly nodded in agreement to help the Cherries avoid liquidation by a matter of minutes and threw another £100,000 of his money into the club's debt void. But today, the circumstances at Bournemouth are a world away. The club now boast players on 7-figure salaries. They fly to matches that are further north than the Midlands, and they are preparing to construct a new training ground at Canford Magna. Their financial footing not only appears secure, it's on a whole new plane. The appearance, then, of 2 multi-million-pound loans on Company's House last week may well have caught some by surprise. 2 days after Bury were expelled from the Football League, Bournemouth registered that they had agreed to borrow around £16 million from an Australian bank called Macquarie, who have in the past been criticised over their ruthless pursuit of profits. The mere reference to loans and the spectre of debt is one that unsurprisingly alarms supporters. The loans are related to the instalments due for the transfers of Tyrone Mings to Aston Villa and Lys Mousset to Sheffield United, and they mark the first time Bournemouth have engaged in something called transfer fee factoring. In a nutshell, the club has agreed to borrow money they are expecting to receive from future instalments from those transfers, a cash advance for a small fee. Defender Mings was sold to Aston Villa for £26.5 million during the summer, of which £6 million is due in July 2020 and £6 million further in July 2021. Bournemouth have instead borrowed that money in advance from Macquarie, who will collect the instalment fees themselves. In the case of Mousset, the club will receive an advance of £4 million. Bournemouth are not alone in entering agreements with Macquarie to factor transfer fee instalments. Watford borrowed money from the Australian bank as part of Richarlison's £50 million transfer to Everton last year. Middlesbrough have done it on several occasions, such as with 2 outstanding instalments of €1.6 million and €1 million for Martin Braithwaite's move to Leganés, while Leicester City borrowed money to immediately bolster their coffers instead of waiting for payments due from Riyad Mahrez's £60 million move to Manchester City in 2018. On the surface, this appears to be a relatively new phenomenon, but as Richard Price explains, it's actually a far more common practice than many realise. Price is the chief executive of New Century Finance, who work with Close Brothers Banking Group exclusively on transfer agreements in the UK. We were the first to do the transfer fee factoring. Literally the first to do it. We came up with a structure that was robust from a credit point of view. I would say that in the Premier League, a minimum of 75% of clubs have done it, and in the Championship, they nearly all do it at some time or other. It's another form of lending from a borrower who is not going to take other security. The practice does not just involve transfer fees, as some clubs also borrow money ahead of their instalments for television rights or sponsorship deals. It's more prevalent in the UK than abroad, according to Price, although it is more popular in Spain and Italy and less so in France and Germany. Factoring is useful for clubs because it helps improve cash flow, offering a clear explanation as to why Bournemouth may have decided to borrow money against their transfer instalments, especially with the construction of their new training ground expected to begin in the next few weeks. Leicester City did something similar with Mahrez's transfer ahead of the construction of their new training ground, which began in April this year and could cost up to £100 million. The Mahrez payments were structured in instalments, with Manchester City due to pay £36 million in 2 payments of £18 million in July 2019 and 2020. The Foxes used a loan from Macquarie to get hold of that money sooner, with their new facility in mind. Improving cash flow also explains why they insisted Harry Maguire's £80 million fee from Manchester United was to be paid up front. Now, any loan will come with a charge. Price, who works for one of Macquarie's competitors, estimates loans can cost around 7.5% for a 1-year deal and closer to 6% for a 3-year deal. For most clubs, it's a price worth paying, not only because of cash flow benefits, but also to help pay for upfront VAT payment, which does not take into consideration the staggered nature of a transfer fee. We're seeing increased interest in the financing of future transfer receivables from football clubs as a way of managing their working capital, explains Jerry Corsack, a managing director for Macquarie's Commodities and Global Markets division. One reason, unknown to most fans, is that the sale of a player incurs a VAT payment. For example, although a club may sell a player for £10 million, it may be receiving those funds over 2 years, so it may be receiving £5 million now, but it also has a VAT bill of £2 million due, and it may still need to buy a replacement player. As the club may need to spend more than the £3 million it has, this form of financing is an efficient way to bridge that deficit. Macquarie are unusual in that they publish the charges on Companies House, potentially as part of its security for their arrangements with Bournemouth and others. Close brothers, however, keep the matter entirely confidential and out of the public eye, with future payments from the buying clubs acting as their only security. This perhaps explains why the practice has flown under the radar somewhat. Price believes publishing on Companies House may allow Macquarie to offer a slightly lower fee, although he says it could affect the club's credit rating because anyone can see the agreement. Bournemouth do not comment on financial matters, but the club are happy that the agreements are transparent, and Macquarie did not comment on why they publish agreements on Companies House. So, should Bournemouth and other fans be worried about their clubs borrowing money this way? No, I don't think so, says Price. As far as the fans are concerned, they read in the paper that Tyrone Mings has gone to Aston Villa. They see that he's gone for, say, £25 million. Most fans will think they've got the £25 million already, and in fact, they haven't. It's all about cash flow. Every company has cash flow up and downs, and getting money in that's already owed to you early, it's useful. It's a form of factoring. Kieran Maguire, a lecturer in football finance at the University of Liverpool, who also keeps a close eye on the financial health of all 92 English football clubs, is also not against the practice. I'm completely agnostic on this, he says. There are a variety of ways of clubs arranging loans. The best and the cheapest is owners' interest-free loans. But sometimes owners can't or decide they don't want to go down that particular route. In terms of transfer fees, this money is ring-fenced, so the banks are effectively guaranteed those transfer fees being paid to them, and they see it as a low-risk form of lending. For Bournemouth then, rather than a case of accumulating the dreaded debts of the past, transfer fee factoring may well be a means by which the construction of their new future can begin. The script for this video, written by Peter Rutzler, was originally featured on The Athletic, the best place to read about football online. Whether it's more financial insight, dedicated local reporting about your team, or rich storytelling from around the world, you'll find it all in one place. For more details on this case, or to read more of Peter's writing about Bournemouth, get a 30-day free trial by visiting theathletic.co.uk/Tifo Football, and get 50% off if you sign up for an annual subscription. To support Tifo, support The Athletic. Thank you for watching.